Last week, Israel's defense minister said the country's National Bureau for Counterterror Financing confiscated millions of dollars in crypto from Hezbollah and from Iran's Quds Force for the first time ever. In a blog post, Chainalysis said that their tools played a role in this, quote, landmark national security achievement. In the post, Chainalysis said that Israel seized a total of about $1.7 million worth of crypto and disrupted cryptocurrency-based terrorism financing infrastructure run by the two organizations. How are your tools able to play a role in detecting this kind of activity?
That's correct. It was a really exciting event to see because it tackled a form of terrorism that we consider to be state-sponsored, looking at Iran's Quds Force as well as Hezbollah in Lebanon. And this is a type of terrorism that's backed by nations that have been unfriendly to other nations in the world. And this is a very successful event to tackle that type of terrorism. And the Chainalysis tools, which are used in this type of seizure, helps the public sector agencies, which are monitoring the money, to trace the funds associated with that terrorism network to services where those funds can be frozen. And in working with the tools, they're able to generate the evidence that they need from the tools, like Chainalysis's Reactor tool, to provide the services with a freeze order and a seize order that removes those funds from that network. And Chainalysis's tools played a really important role in this, and we worked really closely with the agencies and very excited to see the success.
So how did the situation work exactly? Is Chainalysis a contractor for the Israeli authorities, perhaps? And why was it important for Chainalysis to help the Israeli government with this effort?
The data that's provided to the Israeli government so that they're able to map out the entire network of terrorist funds is really important. And that's something that Chainalysis is providing to the Israeli government as well as other governments around the world. And the accuracy and amount of attribution in that data is what's really crucial for them to be able to identify not just a single wallet, but many wallets associated with that terrorist network, and being able to show them the flow of funds in our data and in our tools so that they can trace those funds and seize them back is a long process. It's sometimes months, sometimes years, and it's really exciting to see when it culminates in this type of event. And the Chainalysis tools are widely used across government agencies and within Israel as well.
So in the blog post, expanding on what you just said, Chainalysis notes that the details revealed in the announcement also disclose crucial operational details of how Hezbollah and other groups utilize crypto. Can you take us through some of what was discovered exactly?
Yeah, absolutely. So in our research, we show that terrorist groups and groups that are raising money for their activities will often raise money through crypto. So we saw some of this when Russia invaded Ukraine illegally, where pro-Russia groups were raising funds on Telegram and some chat platforms, and they would put out donation addresses and donations would be made in crypto. You see this also with the terrorist organizations around the Middle East. And recently, a terrorist organization associated with Hamas said that they would stop accepting crypto donations because there has been so much law enforcement action against them, which is really exciting to see. You also have what I believe to be a greater threat, which are the state-sponsored terrorist groups, where nation states are leveraging these networks and cryptocurrency to buy infrastructure, which supports things like cyber attacks. And they're also evading sanctions so that they can engage in markets where they'd otherwise be sanctioned out of. And they're also raising money to support a regime which is in place, which is a sanctioned regime. And that's what you're seeing in this circumstance, where it impacts the state-sponsored terrorist groups that exist in Iran as well as in Lebanon.
So I understand that Chainalysis has more than 1,000 customers in more than 70 countries. That includes government agencies, financial institutions, and crypto businesses. So I'm wondering if you're working with any other specific governments right now to help detect illicit activity.
We work with hundreds of government agencies around the world. We are based in over 20 countries, and we have investigators, engineers, intelligence analysts in all of these countries as well, who are working with both the public and the private sector to engage their and build their capacity to be able to tackle these threats themselves, as well as provide them with the tools and the data that they need to go after this type of threat. We're also working with them on their investigations and helping to provide leads and other types of activity that helps to stop the threat as well. I think what's unique about the space is the engagement of both the public and the private sector. As it relates to crypto, most of the transactions that you're able to view on blockchains are publicly available to be viewed. And the ability of private sector agencies to identify this type of activity, build out these networks, and provide some of that intelligence into the public sector is a really valuable tool that exists in the crypto space. But ultimately, we want the public sector agencies themselves to have the right tools like Chainalysis provides, as well as the training and the capacity so that they are able to do it themselves. And the countries that Chainalysis has been in for a number of years and has built relationships with over a number of years, we're seeing being very successful in this fight. And I've been with Chainalysis for 3 years now, and it's great to see the work that we've built with these countries over years now starting to successfully seize terrorist, state-sponsored terrorist money, successfully seizing North Korean funds, the funds that we've been working with to try to stop for many years now.
Can you provide some specific examples of other countries you work with where you're able to detect illicit activity?
Absolutely. As we look at national security threats around the world, we're working closely with the countries who are impacted by those threats. If you look in Asia, North Korea is becoming a larger and larger threat for the neighboring nations like Japan and South Korea, as well as other major metropolitan areas like Singapore. And we're working in those countries to stop the North Korean threat, monitor transactions that are belonging to the North Korean government and the cybercrime groups in the nation. We're also looking at other rogue nations like Russia after their illegal invasion of Ukraine. A number of countries around the globe are impacted, but certainly those in Europe and in Eastern Europe and the countries that border Russia. So we spend a lot of time looking at Russia transactions and transactions that are associated with Russian entities, and also the money laundering networks that are supporting the Russian regime. You also have Venezuela, who has had a long history of dealing in crypto and trying to stand up programs that will help bring money to their regime. They started a central bank digital currency a number of years ago, and those types of endeavors help to support and finance the regimes which are in place, which are dangerous to some parts of the world. And then, of course, bringing us back to Israel with Iran and terrorism threats across that region and the state-sponsored actors behind them and how we can stop those threats.
I understand that Chainalysis screens an average of $1 trillion in transaction value each month. So what else do you look out for when screening these transactions, and what have you discovered?
So one of the primary goals of Chainalysis tools is to map the transactions that are occurring to real-world entities and real-world categories. So if you're looking at a block explorer and you see crypto transfer from one address to another, you don't know if those addresses are associated with a sanctioned entity or a terrorist group in this circumstance. So what we're doing is we are building intelligence around those addresses so that you know if you're a financial institution or a compliance officer or anyone who is trying to engage in crypto transactions, you know if you're about to process a transaction that's associated with, say, a terrorist organization. You also, from a law enforcement and security standpoint, you're able to look at groups that are national security threats to your country, and you're able to see the transactions that are associated with those threats so that you can engage in law enforcement actions in this case and other types of actions that will stop this type of threat. So mapping those entities and those categories is really vital. And the volume of transactions that Chainalysis is able to provide intelligence on is what's able to stop this type of behavior.
Is there a typical approach used by criminal organizations using crypto to get funds? What do these groups do to try and avoid being traced? Is there anything specific that you look out for? I know you touched on this, but anything that you discovered after these years of following these countries and these organizations?
They're ever evolving their tactics because they do try to get more advanced and more sophisticated as there's more tools available for them to hide their trails. So when they're sourcing funds or they're trying to move money, we see them using mixers. We see them leveraging DeFi protocols and other types of coins beyond Bitcoin and Ethereum more often. And so they are ever evolving their approach to laundering the money. We also see, some dappling, and there's been research that we've put out in mining activities by these rogue nations and the way that they may be able to try to generate crypto wealth. These are all activities that Chainalysis has mapped within our data, and we're closely monitoring along with our public sector and private sector partners, because it's activity that once you identify it's happening, you're able to monitor and you're able to trace in real time and try to stop.
Erin Plant, VP of Investigations at Chainalysis, thank you for that comprehensive overview as to how Chainalysis can help detect illicit activity. We so appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.